Assalamu alaikum. One of the most fascinating books I've ever read, or even heard of for that matter, is Thomas Jefferson's Quran by Professor Denise Spelberg. The title itself is intriguing, isn't it? Some of my Muslim friends, though, they felt a little bit uncomfortable when they first heard of it. They probably thought that Thomas Jefferson had written a book and claimed it was from God or something. I don't know. In actuality, Thomas Jefferson was one of the greatest minds of his time. His personal library, which was the largest private library in the entire country at the time, included an English translation of the Holy Quran, which he had shipped from England to Virginia, where he was a law student. As a side note, he would later sell his personal library to Congress. Today, it is on display in DC as an exhibit as part of the Library of Congress. All right, enough suspense. What's the story behind this Quran? Why is this so significant? It's significant because 11 years after Thomas Jefferson ordered the book, he was writing the Declaration of Independence. And among the discussions the founding fathers would eventually have was who would be part of this new nation, this great experiment. Thomas Jefferson pushed for the inclusion of everyone. Protestant Christians, the majority of Americans then and now, including highly educated individuals like Thomas Jefferson, did not look too favorably upon Jews and Catholics. Among the reason many devout Protestant Christians came or immigrated to the New World was to escape the religious conflicts in Europe. And the stigma surrounding the Jewish community was centuries old in Europe. Still, Jefferson believed that the US should include everyone, even Muslims, which is very impressive for the time. Interestingly, while the founding fathers used Muslims as this abstract litmus test for how tolerant they wanted the US to be, should we include them, should we not? George Washington himself owned Muslim slaves. Imagine that. His records indicate more than one Fatima among the slaves, which is a very common female Arabic Muslim name after the Prophet, peace be upon him, his daughter. All right, so this is exciting to many, but how is it relevant? We're talking over 200 years ago. Well, less than 2 years ago, Dr. Ben Carson, candidate for US president, declares that, quote, "I would not advocate that we put a Muslim in charge of this nation," end quote. Spelberg informs us that the Republican presidential candidate was probably unaware that the debate over Muslims running for office began in 1788. While this historic incident, which revolved around the ratification of the Constitution, is not common knowledge, we should not be surprised since the constitutional principle and universal value of freedom of religion is, quote, "our most cherished ideal," as Spelberg puts it in her article for the time. Dr. Spelberg implores Americans not to question Muslim citizenship and loyalty. It is at times in the heat of Islamophobia and unrest abroad. Neither should their constitutionally guaranteed rights be questioned, which include political participation. Furthermore, Spelberg explains that Islamophobia, as witnessed today, is nothing new. European Protestants had for centuries viewed Muslims as a deviant form of Catholics, going as far as to preach that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the Antichrist. Throughout much of European history, Mohammedans, or Turks as they referred, were seen as the despicable other. Pictures of Muslims were often characterized by violence and misogyny, which are earlier pages in the narrative that include the Danish cartoons of 2005 and the Charlie Hebdo satires of 2012 and the attack of 2015. These examples of freedom of speech, in fact, oppose the very aims of this principle, which is to spread the truth and establish justice, according to John Stuart Mill, who's one of the fathers of liberalism in his essays on liberty. That's my personal conviction, but more on that at a later time. Going back, this theoretical exercise of deciding who would enjoy the new nation's freedom had great historical significance as Europe's centuries-long wars over religion were finally made a matter of the past. As pagans, deists, Catholics, Jews, and even Muslims were permanently sketched into the framework and the fabric of this society. Interestingly, there is a theory that Thomas Jefferson did not merely have a copy of the Quran in his library, but was in fact attracted to certain aspects of the faith, possibly the emphasis on morality and general humanitarianism, and that above all else, his appreciation for the faith indeed influenced his personal views and diplomacy. Regrettably, there is much that we will never know concerning Islam and the founding fathers. Fortunately, great minds like John Locke, Thomas Jefferson, and John S. Mill championed toleration and civic equality when these ideas were not generally very accepted or appreciated. Today, hundreds of years later, it seems that some politicians are blind to the fact that empowered groups will only serve their nations better, while marginalizing minorities will only breed fear, mistrust, and at times even violence.